I am very privileged today to introduce to you Dr. Keith Carlson. Keith has served over the last 18 months, 2 years, as special advisor on outreach and engagement for this university, a term position that is going to be coming to an end, actually, at the end of June. But in the meantime, we do have him here today to talk a little bit more about outreach and engagement and the future of outreach and engagement at this university. I should preface Keith's remarks by letting you know that Keith has had a loss of voice overnight. So he is going to take advantage of the microphone to be able to speak to us. And we will have a chance for some questions and answers afterward. But I think with that, Keith, the stage is yours.
Engagement. The final frontier. These are the voyages of community-engaged scholars. Our mission, to build partnerships with communities and organizations, to co-create knowledge that is both academically and societally meaningful, to boldly go where no scholar has gone before. Sounds better with a voice. I'd like to start off by thanking, of course, Nola. Where's Nola? Thank you very much, Nola, and Lavina, and Lisa, and I don't think Carla's here, and Phaedra. There's a whole group of people, and if I start listing them all, I'll miss, but they've actually set everything up to make it all work so well today, so thank you. For some time now, the University of Saskatchewan, the terms outreach and engagement have been regarded as synonymous and deployed as synonyms. Thank you. They typically roll off faculty, staff, and administrators' tongues as though they could not exist in isolation from one another. And a principal goal of mine today is to break the two terms apart, but not necessarily to say that they aren't connected, but to show that they don't need to always be connected, but that sometimes they must be connected. To accomplish this, I start by providing first an overview of the changing face of outreach and engagement on this campus and across Canada and the United States more broadly. Then I situate the differing disciplinary approaches to outreach and engagement and the tensions that these have revealed. Then I discuss the dynamic tension that exists between teaching engagement and research engagement. Then I finally discuss the different approaches that there are to community-engaged scholarship and where we could be moving on this campus. And I do that by outlining some of the new funding initiatives that are available to faculty and graduate students. So some of this you would have heard little bits of already today. The University of Saskatchewan has a long and proud history of faculty programmatic outreach. And here I'm just saying outreach. Our establishment in 1907 was predicated on the idea that we would be a university of the people. And at the time, demographics were such that the vast majority of the province's population resided in small rural villages far from Saskatoon. Being a provincial university, a university of the people, necessitated reaching out and being relevant to the province. Outreach at its most basic level is what in today's parlance is often called translating and then mobilizing knowledge from the academy to make it meaningful to society. It began on this campus as a means of making academic research and knowledge accessible and impactful to people other than students sitting in college campus classrooms, to communicate to communities that were outside of academia. Early on, our College of Agriculture excelled in this area, bringing information about crop management to rural Saskatchewan farmers, helping them take advantage of new crop strains, advances in soil management and technology to enable them to be more successful, competitive, and stable in the global market. So I'm saying here's sort of the model we were working with at that time. What was known as the Better Farming Train operated annually between 1914 and 1922, bringing faculty, exhibits, equipment, and know-how directly to farming communities. And the university, with provincial endorsement, initiated and ran 4-H clubs alongside the women's extension classes. This is the potato sub-club of the 4-H club, apparently. But it wasn't only in the applied sciences that the University of Saskatchewan shone in terms of outreach. In the trenches of the Great War, U of S history professor Edmund Oliver established what became known as the University of Vimy Ridge, where Canadian soldiers from all battalions in the Canadian Expeditionary Forces could participate in classes covering agricultural and technical information, as well as courses in the liberal arts and humanities. By the 1940s, the University of Saskatchewan, in partnership with federal and provincial departments of agriculture, instituted the Cooperative Extension Program, which in the post-war years expanded to include adult basic education programs, which for the first time saw the hiring of a staff member to oversee program delivery. Meanwhile, while the faculty in the College of Agriculture were reaching out to scattered rural communities, August Kenderdine, head of the U of S Art Department, was pulling Saskatchewan's scattered artists together at Emma Lake to help create a sense of community and to foster a distinctive artistic style. Decades later, these artists would be joined by biologists, soil scientists, and others. The University of Saskatchewan's growing outreach programs were part of a broader movement in the years following the Second World War that saw governments increasingly reach out to people in disadvantaged circumstances to bring to them technical and scientific assistance. Universities were often at the forefront of this process, but they were increasingly tied to government agencies, both local and national. In the United States, students enthusiastically enrolled in John F. Kennedy's Peace Corps, while government funding went to support research and initiatives such as the Green Revolution. In Canada, federal programs like CETA reflected the idea that knowledge and technical skills of Canadian faculty and scientists could be brought to bear on issues of global scope. And under Pierre Trudeau, the federal government sponsored what was in effect a sort of domestic Canadian Peace Corps known as Katimavik, where university-age students travel the country providing volunteer service while developing leadership skills. Here at the U of S, faculty continued to connect with people within and beyond our provincial borders. Agriculture again led the way, but faculty from that college were increasingly joined by others, typically scientists, who deployed their expertise in ways that assisted and helped them to inform not only farmers and farm organizations, but in the fields of environmental management and assessment, resource management planning, and other areas. Teaching ran parallel to these research initiatives. In 1963, the University Extension Division at the University of Saskatchewan became more coordinated by including participation from several different colleges and bringing a new focus on adult education and continued learning. With the establishment of the province's new regional colleges, the U of S Extension Division assumed even greater responsibility for distant ed, especially at the first and second year levels, and even more especially in areas that prepared students in ways that met practical local needs or that aimed to prepare them to enter senior undergraduate classes here on the Saskatoon main campus. But even as these outreach programs grew in scope, others within the academy looked for different means to transfer and translate academic knowledge so that it could be more in tune with community needs as defined by communities themselves. Outreach that was not based upon strong partnerships, that is to say, outreach that did not involve the affected communities in the early stages of planning and then in the implementation and ultimately in evaluation of the programs, ran the risk of having goals and processes that were misaligned with the desired outcomes. More importantly, they ran the risk of arrogant ethnocentrism and voice appropriation, where highly educated Western urban academics decided in isolation what was in society's best interest and then delivered the cure. The Green Revolution may have staved off mass starvation in the 1960s India, but at what cost, people began to ask. Capital-intensive industrial agriculture produced more food per acre, but it did so by creating monocultured crops that were increasingly reliant upon expensive technologies, industrial fertilizers, and insecticides. Moreover, the management of the Green Revolution farms undermined local indigenous cultural identities. And perhaps more to the point, the increase in agricultural output resulted in an increase in population that threatened to therefore sow the seeds for the very issues that had caused it to be started in the first place. The lesson was clear. Old school outreach, though laden with the potential to benefit society, was underpinned by certain assumptions that were at their core somewhat and potentially arrogant. In their most extreme forms, they assumed that good information flowed in one direction, from the ivory tower down, and that the creation of knowledge was the prerogative of domains and the domain of the state and the university. You all know who he is. You don't know who he is. I mean, you know who he is, that kind of guy. In response to such critiques, the past 40 years of outreach have witnessed an increasing emphasis on partnering and engaging with communities, on conducting research and teaching in communities, for communities, and with communities. By the 1980s, community-based research had become mainstream, even in disciplines that had previously been reluctant to set foot outside of the campus. And at the University of Saskatchewan, this has taken many forms, both in terms of research and in terms of teaching. For example, the Centre for the Study of Co-ops was created on campus in 1984 out of a partnership between the Saskatchewan Co-op Centre, the provincial government, and the university. By the late 1990s, the U of S campus celebrated the establishment of the Community University Institute for Social Research, CUSR. Those whose guiding principles committed faculty to collaborative research that was built on authentic partnerships, built on trust and respect. Their aims remain centered around social issues with an eye to opportunities for influencing public policy. That same year, 1999, saw the establishment of SPHERU. Did I get the SPHERU slide? There we go, thank you. The Saskatchewan Population Health and Evaluation Research Unit. And meanwhile, the College of Engineering annually sent students out to design structures identified by communities as important and needed. Across campus, the Department of Music not only studied but contributed directly to Saskatchewan's vibrant performing arts community. Drama faculty and students worked with and supported Saskatoon's native theatre, while faculty from the English department contributed individually and through curricular initiatives to the Saskatchewan Writers Co-op, the Sask Writers Guild, and the Sask Writers Guild. And faculty in the social sciences and humanities divisions collaboratively mentored students involved in studying the complexities of globalization through the interdisciplinary International Studies program. In the history department, we see the housing of North America's only humanities-based ethnohistory field school program, while in geography and planning, the RUP program operates in close partnership with the City of Saskatoon's urban planners. And these initiatives make up only a few that are existing and thriving on campus. Likewise, at St. Thomas More College, a U of S federated college, likewise, St. Thomas More College led the way in the charge to integrate outreach and service and social conscience into the basic liberal arts education curriculum. Developments at STM ran in concert with and indeed helped inspire and shape similar initiatives in community-engaged service learning delivered through the University Learning Center. One of these classes has become more recently the ICCC's Dynamics of Community Involvement program. But if these activities, programs, and initiatives are individually impressive, they unfortunately represented less a coordinated, concerted effort to transform the legacy of outreach into a mandate for engagement than individual efforts of dedicated individuals and committed faculty from disparate departments, colleges, and schools across campus. Seeking to better coordinate and to enrich outreach and engagement activities on campus, in 2002, there was the Strategic Directions document, followed in 2007 by the University of Saskatchewan's foundational document on outreach and engagement. The second document committed the university to 5 strategies for outreach and engagement: service learning, community-university research partnerships, economic development, technology transfer and knowledge creation, and finally, international outreach and engagement. As an outcome of research that went into the drafting of the foundational document, the old extension division was retired, with faculty being reassigned to disciplinary departments and colleges, while the extension's core outreach teaching functions were transferred to the newly created Center for Continuing and Distant Education. Relatedly, several of the university's university identified several commitment areas under its second integrated plan. The Aboriginal Commitment Working Group examined a wide range of issues pertaining to First Nations and Métis people, and their recommendations resulted directly in the creation of our new Office of First Nations and Métis Engagement, located at the English River site. There we go. A second commitment working area, entitled Engaging with External Partners, examined and reported on what was and was not working in terms of off-campus partnerships. This group came up with a series of definitions for best practices for building and sustaining partnerships in its 2002 final report, and it reaffirmed and refined the university's commitment to first fostering and modeling a culture that values external partnerships as critical to innovative scholarly research and teaching, and secondly, to becoming distinguished for its engagement programs locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally. More recently, it also resulted in the establishment of the university's new Office of Community Engagement at Station 20 West, where faculty, students, and staff design and deliver programs in partnerships with representatives of Saskatoon's core neighborhoods. The External Partners Working Group also identified ways and means of assessing good partnerships from weak or bad ones. And additionally, it identified how the University of Saskatchewan could take advantage of its position as a research-intensive university that was still relatively small in terms of faculty and student numbers. Sorry, I think I got out of sync with my slide for a second. So now, all that history you're asking, why did he do it other than that he's a history professor? In part because it sets up where we are today and helps us to understand why things are the way they are today. And for better, for worse, what we're looking to accomplish in the future. So if I narrow this discussion down now from one of outreach and engagement more broadly to one of community engaged scholarship specifically, several things have become apparent. The first is that different disciplines have come to community engaged scholarship through different paths. They have specific histories, methodologies, approaches, and rationales. Previous efforts to bring some of these together under different names have met with resistance, not because the goal was deemed unworthy, but because despite the promise and potential of interdisciplinary cooperation and cross-fertilization, disciplines remain proud and protective of themselves and the way they do things. They still too often resent seeing others enter what they regard as their domain. They still too often insist that when others do enter areas that they consider their domain, that these interlopers conform to specific methods of those disciplines. Now, this is the part of my talk that gets more and more controversial, so I'm not just giving a happy days talk here. I'm also trying to challenge us to think about ways that we could be doing things a little differently. And I have a list of just some of the tensions that I've encountered between different disciplines. And I'm going to give one example that comes from the tensions within history and anthropology, because that's the area where I work. This isn't to say there's tension between historians and anthropologists. I'm talking more broadly about the tensions between some of the disciplines. So a discipline like anthropology, for example, they've been working in communities all along, working for communities for generations, and consistently working with communities in genuine partnerships for decades. They have battle scars from their fight to wrestle first salvage ethnography and then structural functionalism to the canvas, and they're rightly suspicious of those who dance in to work in a community, especially their communities, who do not appear to have paid their dues or to have not have applied the appropriate methods and techniques. Such protectionism, and anthropology is not alone here, can serve to discourage scholars who are seeking to borrow and apply aspects of the methods and experience from one discipline in order to answer questions arising in another. Publications can be stalled in peer review when referees are selected because of their supposed methodological appropriateness without regard for the respective and potentially different disciplinary ends to which that methodology might be put. I've encountered on this campus over the past year and a half in conversations with several different deans, department heads, and faculty members who have told me that they have discouraged, and they continue to discourage, new faculty from participating in interdisciplinary work generally and community-engaged scholarship specifically, for fear that the resulting research will be difficult to place within journals that are recognizable and acceptable to faculty peers on tenure and promotion committees. And yet we know that community-engaged scholarship, through meaningful partnerships, holds within it the potential to create new kinds of knowledge that simply could not be created in academic isolation. Moreover, these new forms of co-created knowledge have within them the immense potential to be meaningful precisely because of the consultative and cooperative manner in which they were generated. If we are to nurture and grow these new ways of knowing, we must first find means to overcome the obstacles currently laying in new faculty members' paths. This means finding ways for new faculty from one discipline to learn the methods and techniques of another discipline, to enable and encourage faculty to engage in best practices that mitigate the risk of partnerships going sour, to provide financial means to support the creative and new community-engaged research and teaching partnerships that faculty desire, and to educate tenure and promotion committees about the differing timelines and other problems in quotes, that sometimes accompany good community-engaged scholarship. I'm pleased to say that through the efforts of various faculty and staff across campus, the University of Saskatchewan has now taken bold steps to create just these sorts of incentives. And I'm going to outline some of those at the end of this discussion. And this should not be taken to mean that there will be a homogeneity of community engagement on campus. We know and respect that different disciplines have different ways and that assumptions prevail. Rather, Rather, that by distinguishing and defining terms such as outreach and engagement and a community and partnership in ways that recognize the diversity of approaches on campus and that still provide clear incentives towards best practices, we can create and recognize a community of engaged scholars that consists of faculty who can comfortably exist along multiple continuums. The language of community engaged scholarship, and you know, there isn't a department of community engaged scholarship on this campus, and I think that's a good thing because we see it as a process and a means that should permeate other disciplines and departments where appropriate. So the language of community engaged scholarship enables us to prioritize support in a manner that creates transdisciplinary middle grounds where scholars can enrich and expand their discipline rather than having it threatened or dismissed. Community engaged scholarship as a standalone node of academic endeavor holds potential for escaping turf wars. It is not and cannot be just community-based research, nor can it be just reduced to community service learning. It is these things and more. To be fully realized, it must be research and pedagogy that are thoughtfully combined and harmonized. In this regard, we can recognize that outreach in and of itself is a valuable activity worthy of support and celebration. There are times when it is not only appropriate, but essential that faculty translate and mobilize knowledge that they have created on campus so that it can be accessed in meaningful ways and put to use by society. But we can also see outreach as a stage on a continuum moving from non-engaged to fully engaged. From this perspective, outreach can serve as a foundation upon which greater community engagement can be built. Viewed as a continuum, the difference between community-based research and full community-engaged scholarship becomes explicit. Again, as with research, as with outreach, community-based research, where community members serve as participants and informants, that is to say, where faculty work in a community and potentially for a community, but not necessarily with a community, can and should be recognized as something that is valuable and actively worthy of support and celebration. But like outreach, community-based research, where community members provide information, can also be considered as a foundation upon which more fully engaged community scholarship can be built. And so I'm trying to show here that there's a continuum, and it's not as though everybody needs to aspire in all cases to the far end of the continuum, but that we need to be aware of the potential and the drawbacks of where we situate ourselves on this continuum. This is not to say that full community engaged scholarship is appropriate or ultimately provides the answers to all questions and projects. One can imagine a medical study where the goal of better health is so obvious and its benefits so potentially widespread that community involvement at the participant level is the most appropriate form of engagement. Likewise, one could imagine an education project where the goal is to study, where the goal of the study is to improve education levels or to identify and strategize around impediments to educational success, where again, the participation with the community might be simply at the participant level. Relatedly, though community-engaged scholarship is generally equated with research that serves to advance the community's self-identified goals and aspirations, one can imagine that such is not always necessarily the case. Here are some of the examples that I've heard on campus would be a political scientist who's working with a street gang that's involved in organized crime, working with that street gang, forming partnerships. But when the street gang asked the political scientist to help him develop better systems of governance so that their drug and prostitution singles could be more effectively handled, that's a point where you sort of back away from some of the shared goals that might be there. Or you can imagine the historian who's interested in the Holocaust and the Second World War may be very interested in talking to members who are alumni of the Hitler Youth without wanting in any way to align their research interests and priorities with that organization. And so community engaged scholarship is also necessarily concerned with multiple factors, each of which can be seen moving somewhat independently on this continuum. So here, get this right, imagine each of these moving along. So if it's community designed, how much is the community involved? Way over here, down here. It's a continuum. It's not a place and a fixed point. The same is the knowledge being exchanged and co-created. It could be happening at a very basic level, or it could be happening at an extremely fulsome kind of level. Is it linked to faculty teaching programs? Perhaps the faculty member is doing great community-based research, but it only has a marginal expression in their classroom activities. Is it enhancing a student experience? And if it is it a great student experience that's way up here on the continuum, but that might not be fully connected to the faculty member's research? So these aren't meant to be fixed points on this line, but rather you could imagine each of these moving independently. And that's where it becomes so complicated. More obviously, on this campus, there remains a big divide between teaching and research that is too often too wide. So if we're thinking of those top levels moving along, we can ask ourselves, well, generally speaking, where does the research fall? And each one of these bubbles represents a different place, not a fixed place in a particular faculty member's activities. And then where does that overlap with the teaching? How does the teaching move along that continuum? What we want to see on this campus, I think, and we're hearing this a lot from people working in the SODL area this morning. We're also hearing this from people who are doing community-based research, who are looking at how do I move this into my classroom. And we're hearing this from people who do great community-engaged teaching and are asking, how do I link this to faculty research programs? The goal ultimately has to be to not only enrich one activity with the other, but to look for opportunities on campus where we can leverage one type of partnership into the other type of partnership. And that might happen within a single faculty member's activity. That is to say that I could be doing some really interesting community-engaged scholarship, research in a community, and I could potentially leverage that into a teaching relationship for my own teaching activities. Or I could partner with someone else who is doing a teaching, looking for a teaching partnership to come in and build on the reputation that the University of Saskatchewan has through the solid research partnership, or vice versa. So this brings us to a point that I think where we could start talking about what does excellence in research and excellence in teaching mean as relates to the way we engage with communities. And here, I'm using the word engagement a little bit differently than I have earlier in the talk. And I want you to start with this central slide here. You often hear faculty saying, I'm engaged with that topic, whatever it might be. I'm engaged with war in society. I'm engaged with gender conflicts. I'm engaged in economic development activities. But you wonder, what does the engagement mean? Is it simply an area of interest, an area that the person has been reading in? The measure, of course, is going to be in the actions that come from that engagement. And we're quite good on this campus, and we have recently worked well to say if you follow the arrow from engagement this direction, we see research activities. So if you're engaged in something, you have a passion about something, is it manifesting itself in Tri-Council or other peer-reviewed grants? Is it manifesting itself in publications that are being peer-reviewed and bringing new knowledge, and or if you're in the fine arts, performances? And ultimately, some of these activities become, way over in this far category, signature research areas for which our campus or a particular department or college is known and distinguished across Canada and perhaps more broadly. I don't think we've yet fully worked this way, and I'm excited about the work that Patty is doing in partnership with the Gwen Moss Centre and the University Learning Centre, because I think there's opportunities here for a reflective sort of mirror going the other direction. If you're engaged in a topic, you have your passion, your interest, does it reflect itself in a major? Can a student major in what you're passionate about? Or is there a minor? Or at least individual courses that might focus on it? Or is it perhaps a single lecture within a full class that runs over a term? Those kind of curricular activities could ultimately translate, I think, if we thought about communities of participants on campus, into signature pedagogies potentially. And I think there's lots of potential here. And it's a way, again, to distinguish what we do to attract students. Why go to the University of Calgary when you could come here and there's something that we can guarantee you're going to experience as a student that sets this campus apart? And ultimately, my point here is that as we're doing that, I think one of the key considerations, and there would be many, is to think about how community-engaged scholarship and teaching start to inform one another. So if we have a signature research that is involving community engaged scholarship, which I think many of them do, and we'll see that this afternoon at the cafe sessions, we're also seeing that in the teaching, but too often that bottom line hasn't drawn the two together. So here's some ways that we've been talking about how we might go about doing that. Is the community involved? Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Is the community involved in the planning? Is it involved in implementing? Is it involved in assessing? And from the community's point of view, we have to ask, is there benefit to the university? Does it result in grants, publications, enhanced prestige? And then we also have to ask, is there benefit to the community? Because there is a power imbalance there. We can't leave it up to the community to always identify these things themselves. And these other points are matters that I brought up earlier in the conversation already. So how do we go about doing that? So here's the part that all of you who are looking for money this summer have been waiting for. We have started unfolding already. Some of these have been announced in the past month and last week, but now fully today. $150,000 in annual funding that is going to go directly to faculty and graduate students. I've heard loud and clear that the resources on this campus need to go into faculty hands. They need to go into hands that will encourage research, that will enhance research, and that will enable students to have different types of learning experiences than they could have otherwise. And so we've worked long and hard creating partnerships on campus with different groups to bring as much money together in a place that can be accessed directly by faculty as possible. And so we started off in this case, I think people might be interested in this, with roughly $85,000 or $90,000 in annual funding that we thought we would be able to make available. But through partnering and through a lot of consultation across campus, this has now come up to $150,000 annually. So if anybody knows Lisa Erickson, you can wave your hand. Lisa, for example, has at her disposal $10,000 down at the Station 20 West office that are innovation funds for any faculty member to access as they build partnerships, whether those are teaching or research partnerships down in the core neighborhoods. And these are not onerous to apply for. Right, Lisa? These are the sort of things that you go down, you see Lisa, you talk about a partnership, you work out some of those deals, and then the resources are there. And ideally, there's something that are being partnered with the resource that a faculty member is already bringing. President Shirk grants, other types of grants that you're bringing to that partnership. Is Nola here? Where's Nola? Nola over in this corner is spearheading a new speaker series for outreach across the province. Again, bringing that sort of information that is being generated on campus back into the communities. And so again, we're honoring the full spectrum of outreach and engagement along that continuum. We're creating a brand new journal because, as in the discussions earlier today about SOTL, the scholarship of community engagement often falls off the radar. Faculty who are eager to publish in disciplinary peer-reviewed journals do so because that's what tenure and promotion committees want to see. But we also know that there is a great scholarship on community engagement, and a lot of that really great activity is happening here on this campus. I gave you that little run-through earlier of what some of those were. So there is going to be a new journal. Natalia Glenko-Frazen, is she here today? She is the convener of a committee that is pulling together an editorial board and getting an editor in place. That journal is going to be called The Engaged Scholar. So there's $7,000 that will ultimately go to a course release for the editor. There's $20,000 for supporting the managing editor activities of that journal, which we expect will likely be used to support a graduate service fellowship. And there will be $8,000 for an annual symposium like this, but where we're drawing in external speakers and people doing best practices here on this campus, both in research and in teaching. This is something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, as far as I know. $12,000 are going out in Catalyst grants. These are in $3,000 chunks. These are for you wonderful scholars out there who are doing research and teaching in, with, and by, and for communities, and who keep publishing those great articles on law, anthropology, sociology, whatever it might be, to step back for a moment and publish an article in partnership with a graduate student that you select as your co-author, not as a research assistant, to actually publish an article in a peer-reviewed journal. It doesn't have to be our new journal, because there's other ones out there, that is all about the process by which you did that, good and bad. How did you struggle? What worked? What did you borrow from other disciplines? What didn't work? That sort of thing. $12,000 for community engaged learning opportunities. And these are to support faculty who are already doing engagement with communities in their teaching. And again, this is designed to be partnered up with the funding that the University Learning Center has for experiential learning. And again, those go out in $4,000 chunks. $20,000 for community engaged student scholarship. This is to recruit the best and brightest doctoral student from across Canada to come here and work with one of our scholars on this campus. We just instituted this last month. We put the call out through the College of Graduate Studies, who is co-sponsoring this. That's one of the partnerships where the funding is shared. And we were swamped with people inquiring about what this would mean. And we're just starting the adjudication process this week. $30,000 in community engaged scholarship seed money. This will go out in $6,000 increments to faculty who want to form new partnerships with communities that are genuinely meaningful in addressing community needs and interests. Now, again, you could imagine, I think a creative faculty member will be partnering these up with existing other grants from other places, President Shirk grants, NSHIRKs, that sort of thing. But it's there and it's available in $6,000 increments. $10,000 for community engaged communications. There was, in these sorts of programs, when they're being initiated, there's often a lot of effort that goes into identifying a good advertising company who's going to come in and design something that's going to communicate and make that message available out beyond our campus to either help us recruit students, to help us position ourselves, to help new faculty who are thinking of applying for work here to see the kinds of things that we're doing. We thought another way to do this might be to partner with EMAP, the Fine Arts Departments, and the Digital Minor program, so that it's student and faculty-led initiatives where they're creating what are essentially promotional videos about the activities that are going on campus, and that'll be happening over the summer. Also $5,000 that can go out in as small a chunks as $100 or up to something else until the $5,000 is spent. For those of you who are doing this sort of work and would like to have something to help document what you're doing. So you're heading up to the Northwest Territories to study polar bears. Wouldn't it be great if there was one of your students was given a bit of training and provided access to cameras and recording equipment so that you could help to document that and use it in your classrooms back on campus, that sort of thing. We have $8,000 that will go towards kindergarten to grade 12 outreach programs. There's currently a lot of different programs on this campus, ranging from the Science Museum to the Museum of Antiquities and a host of others. I won't even start to try to list them, who are doing work that is promoting university education in schools, partnering with schools. And so this funding is meant to enrich those existing programs in ways that they've been asking for. And there's a few other smaller ones, but that's the main part. So thank you very much. I'm happy to try to answer questions while my voice still lasts. I should have planted some graduate students out there with prefabricated questions. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit more about the journal you're planning to put together, the Engaged Scholar?
Engaged Scholar, yes. Sorry?
The timeline, when do you think it's going to get?
There's a committee that's currently working on that. I'm a part of that committee, but I'm not the point person on it. They're hoping to have the graduate student fellowship in place by September, and so the work would be beginning. And then ideally, it's only going to publish twice a year. It will be only online. And so next spring, I'm expecting that there'd be the first, it would start to roll out. Yeah.
What's your answer to some of those faculty who are saying, okay, great, I'm doing this cross-disciplinary research, and now I can't find a journal to place it in because it doesn't really fit into any of those kind of reductionist models. What do you tell them? Because of course we want to get as much research published, and it has to be published somewhere.
Yes.
So how do you respond to those faculty that have it as a concern?
Yeah, it's a real concern. I'm not at all trying to say faculty shouldn't worry about that. They should. They need to be strategic about it. And also within our disciplines, what gets published in journals changes over time. So what is being published in a disciplinary journal about the outcomes of research increasingly is involving aspects of that are community engaged. So we're seeing the rise of new journals that publish on the process, but we're also seeing older disciplinary and interdisciplinary journals being much more open to that kind of cross-pollination. But it's a matter of being very strategic and thinking hard about how you're doing that. I guess if I was to think about what in here is going to be the hardest thing for my successor to deal with, it's still going to be, I think, those disciplinary boundaries that we have on this campus between departments, colleges, schools, that sort of thing, where certain people have a sense that this is how it should be done. And so we're hoping, right now we have 97, I believe at the last count I checked, Lisa, 97 scholars who are on a list of people doing community engaged scholarship of various kinds. That's just the faculty. There's more people if you added in the staff who are doing this kind of work, and that isn't everybody. But those people are coming together in ways that they just never would have had an opportunity to communicate with before. And so once a month it happens down at Station 20 West, and then it happens on campus the following month. There's always sort of a key presentation that goes on, and it's an opportunity for people from different disciplines to say, how do you do what you do, and how might I learn from that? It's very exciting on this campus for that.
Thank you, Lou.
I have a question for you, Keith. I can't say how important it is to have Station 20 West located where it is and giving access and building bridges to communities that the university hasn't worked with as much in the past. But how do we broaden beyond Station 20 West, and how do we access those other communities as well? And what kind of support is there at the most senior levels at the university to facilitate that? I mean, you've just given us a long list of incentives, but are there more institutional supports that are being considered in order to keep us all moving in that direction?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the great things about being in this position has meant that I've had opportunities to talk to people in areas of the campus that I wouldn't normally be doing. And to hear people in the Office of the Vice President of Research talking about the new initiatives for internationalization and research, for example. A great deal of that is based on community engagement. We have people, one of my colleagues here, Marie Loverod, it has her course that she takes students to New York, but it starts off with the students first doing classwork, learning sort of thematic issues that will be encountered in that study abroad class, right down at Station 20 West in Saskatoon's core neighborhoods. And I see that's happening all over the campus as awareness is growing.
I heard that he was referring that there is some sense of discouragement from the department level for the new faculty members to get into this community engagement. Is this still the case, or has it changed?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to overplay that. There are some deans and some department heads and some senior scholars who are wonderful mentors and role models who are really encouraging new faculty to do this. And of course, the other thing is there's a whole bunch of new generation of faculty who just say, this is what I do. This is how I do it, and I won't be discouraged from that. But that isn't to say that everybody feels that way, and of course that's the prerogative of people in those sort of leadership positions. What I've been trying to do is provide them with information that would help them mitigate some of the concerns that they have as they advise some faculty to steer away from that kind of activity. Okay, thank you very much.